This is a Land Rover Discovery, and for those of you who don't know, I love Land Rovers, so if you think we're going to give this an objective review, you're wrong, because it's just great. Don't watch the rest of it. Anyway, if you feel like watching the rest of it and wasting your time, because I'm already going to tell you it's a great car, stick around, because not only is this, yes, a great car, the big question for me is, do you get this or a Defender 110? And that's what we're going to dive into a little bit today. We're also going to fully evaluate this car, try all 3 rows of seats. I'm going to walk you through the pricing, the engine, the driving dynamics. We're going to take it off-road, on-road, on the highway, talk about the options, specifications, all the boring stuff. But if you're in the market for a Discovery, hopefully this video will help you because, yeah, I'm a Land Rover guy, owned a few, very familiar with the brand. Can't wait to share some of my impressions of the new Discovery with you. This is something bronze color. Looks great. I would probably not spec this color, but if you do, good on you because it looks awesome. Take a look at this. You wouldn't even know it's dirty. It's the same shade as Colorado dirt. Anyway, let me take you on a quick tour of this car, and then we'll get it out on the road and drive it, of course. But let's start with the heart of this thing. I'll pop the hood. You come up over this way. And under the hood is one of the all-time great powertrains, the new Ingenium Inline 6. Now, we drove this engine in the Defender a year ago when it first launched, and I was hugely impressed with it. Now, we have a detuned version of the same thing. It's a 3-liter inline 6-cylinder engine paired with a 48-volt mild hybrid integration. Now, it's not utilizing the 48-volt systems as much of other cars. We'll talk about that when we drive it. And it doesn't make as much power as the Defender 110, as which this chassis shares with the Defender. There are some differences, which I'll get into, but I'll give you the specs of this first. 355 horsepower, 369 pound-feet of torque, and that should give you a 0 to 60 time in, who cares? It's a Land Rover. It's fast enough. Thing freaking rips. 8 gear ratios, and the transmission and engine calibration and tuning are spot on, stellar, best in the business in my opinion. Driving this thing in extreme cold weather, in warm weather, the calibration is truly stellar, even up here at crazy altitude. You'd be surprised how many modern cars we get up here to 9,000 feet of elevation where we are right now. Nears makes no difference. They start struggling, they get these weird surging. This doesn't even care, and it's a Land Rover. Take a look under the hood though. Since we're here, I'll show you some of the engine components. You can see it sucks in air from 2 separate areas. You can see the top of the strut tower here. The damper is actually electric, so it's going to be constantly adjusting not only ride height with air suspension, but also ride stiffness through a damper adjustment. You also get displays there. Interesting chassis bracing going on back over this way. I believe it uses a water-to-air intercooler, which I think might be up top. That might be the, I don't know. It's in there somewhere. I don't think it uses an air-to-air, so it should keep itself relatively cool. Yeah, I mean, just a very smooth, competent driveline in this particular vehicle. LED headlights on this particular one look awesome. This is the refresh model. This particular car is a 2021. It's pretty much unchanged for 2022. It's also pretty fresh. It just has 4,000 miles on it, so hasn't really been driven that hard. The spec on this one, again, P360 is the horsepower, or I should say PS. It's a 355 horsepower, 360 PS. This is the R Dynamic, which gives you these wheels, which look stellar. Some of this body cladding around too. Just changes the styling a bit. I don't think it does anything for performance except add some paddle shifters on the wheel. Door handles, chunky. Door thunk, chunky. Everything in here is nice. Take a look at some of these materials inside too. Really nice weave texture. A little bit of padding under here. Land Rover just knows how to do everything right. Everything's sized right so you can hit it with gloves on. 3 memory seating for the passenger seats. Wonderful. Meridian sound system, we'll talk about it, isn't incredible like it is in some of the Range Rover stuff. In the back seats, you get this same wonderful door card. You even have this really cool technology, which is like a blind spot for your rear door opening. So if you're sitting in the rear seat, which I am right now, and I go to open the door and some dude's riding up on a bicycle or a car, this will let me know, hey, don't open your door. Love that technology. That will save lives. There is this very curious pocket here, which you can like stick your finger in. I don't know if it's for a flashlight or what, but it would I have no idea what's supposed to go there. If you do, please comment below. Interesting little tiny door sill plaque right there. Nice rear seat storage, USB ports, and then also a little mounting position for rear seat accessories that we've seen before. 2 big pieces of glass in this versus the 3 from LR3 and LR4. So yeah, I mean, the new Discovery's been out for a few years now. It's not that different than, I mean, the refresh isn't that different than the previous one. Has the new UI, which is awesome, which we'll talk about when we get to the front seat. Let me show you one of the problems with this car, and that is the electrically controlled second and third row seats. The third row seats are fine because you can put them up and down with these switches right here. Totally cool. The problem comes with this switch. You push this button, thankfully it does it automatically. And you gotta wait and wait and wait for this to go forwards. Then you push this thing forwards. Oh wait, the front passenger seat is too far back anyway. And then you gotta like climb your way in the third row, which you can put up from this little switch. One of them, I don't know. There we go. So you can put it up right here. You can see it raises the second row. It's about to hit the partition and yeah, hit the partition, can't go down. There's just a lot of things that need to be like in place and perfect to get into the third row. And we took some friends out to dinner in this car last night and just explaining to them, oh, please pull up on this switch, then put this seat back, and then like recline this, do this. Just make it manually adjusted or fast if it's electric. Fuel tank size, not sure, but let's talk MPG. I recently took this on our MPG loop. I don't know if that video's up or about to go up, but it did 27.3 average on the highway at 70 miles an hour, which is amazing. Towing, it can do it. I don't know tow ratings, but what? How much is it?
8,200.
8,200 pounds of towing. Really?
Yep.
Holy smokes. Yep. This thing can tow. I had no idea it was that much. That's wild. We have it in off-road height too, which is its full height, which is why this is so large. But there's a great feature that I can hit this little button and it'll drop the rear. If you take a look from far away, you'll see we're squatting this thing North Carolina style. And now my golden retriever can more easily get into the back of the Land Rover Discovery. No air vents back here for the third row. That's a real problem in hot summertime situations, and especially for dogs. I would have loved to see air vents in the third row. You also have your seat controls back here, so you can raise and lower the third row and second row, and you have a 12 volt, which is really nice. What's under here? Some storage. Oh, take a look at this. USB ports for the third row. That's sweet, one on either side. Boom. That's pretty ingenious. Let's close this. It's getting windy up here at the top. It's a nice day though. Look at the view here in Colorado. Absolutely stunning, isn't it? Jumping back into the second row. Come on over on my side, Jordan, actually. I'm gonna move some of these bags out of the way because we're using this as our filming rig for the day. So we're kind of mixing our review and film into one. Jumping in. This is behind myself. I just wanted to show you real leg room. 6'1", here is my size. Plenty of knee room, plenty of headroom, plenty of shoulder space. It's a great, great back seat. And it's, yeah, perfect for small families, I would say, where you have to haul around a couple extra. Jordan, you actually sat in the third row as an adult and fit fine. Yeah. So third row's got a lot more space than most other third rows. Let's jump inside. We'll go through some infotainment stuff. Then we'll get it out on the road. Inside the Land Rover, let's start it super smooth. What's interesting is because it's a mild hybrid, it doesn't use a traditional starter motor, so it just whirs into life. It's really nice. Even on the coldest of days, which we started this thing at about 0 degrees Fahrenheit, it just starts up, does a cold start cycle for about 15 seconds, pretty aggressive, and then just sits at idle, like every Land Rover. It doesn't stay up there all day. You just really, really good cold weather calibration, and it does not mind the cold. Also, heated steering wheel, and a little trick to turn on the heated seats. You just push this in, twist it to the right, and there you go. They do make you feel bad for cheaping out though, because you see this little blue thing, you would think it has air conditioned seats, but it doesn't. So you only get heated ones. So they just make you feel bad for not spending even more money on their car for the air conditioned seats. Inside, the driving position is wonderful. You do sit really high, great sight lines all around. I also have a 360-degree view camera, which I can of course conduct a movie on if I wanted to. So let's change the camera angles around. Absolutely wonderful. Looks good up here, and that's the similar spec to this car that we have right here. So I think that's pretty cool. Love that. You also have some off-road ones where you can see sort of your wheels turning over here, which is kind of nice. and even a towing one, so you can line up your trailer perfectly. When we're in reverse, you'll see we get the little line, and you just back it right over your trailer. That is incredibly useful and incredibly accurate in my experience towing with other Land Rovers. Within this infotainment system, there's individual user profiles. We've tested this system in other vehicles like the Defender, and it's stellar. Land Rover just went insanely crazy designing this system. You have some maps, what am I trying to say? You have some apps, thank you. And I love this one. So you can go to 4x4 info. You can see how deep the water is that you're wading through. You can see your articulations, everything like this. Your altitude, 8,300 feet of elevation right here. I love wade sensing. You can see you can go through 2 feet 8 inches, although depending on the vehicle's suspension, you can actually go through, I believe, up to 3 feet, just depending on how the car is compressing its suspension and not. The system itself is good. The sound system's good, although I would say in the mid-range it gets pretty muddy, so it's very song specific. The problem is you don't get too much audio adjustments. So let me head over here to audio and I'll show you what I'm talking about. If I go to settings and then I go to audio, there we go. You don't get a mid-range. So you get treble, bass, and sub. It's a Meridian system, but you don't get mid-range. And so it's just a little bit muddy, but you also need the bass and subwoofer up a little bit to get some more kick. So I'm not thrilled with the sound system. It's fine for general listening though. It's just like, if you're coming from a Range Rover and you like that 30 speaker Meridian, you're not going to get that here. Fun little trick here, push this button, you get a secret compartment, and it's pretty deep. Interestingly, because your air conditioning controls have moved down to here, they now pop up on your screen here. This top one's for your heated windshield. You probably can't see it, but there's little lines in the windshield. Most Land Rovers have that, which is really lovely. And yeah, climate control is great. Everything's great up here. There's also terrain response, which we'll talk about when we go off-roading in our review. There's a low range section, but then interestingly in this little square, there's a grayed out, not available. There's an EV button. So this would be for a plug-in hybrid version, which is not on sale, at least in our market. It might be globally. We'll talk about driver assistance and all that stuff on the highway. It's enough sitting around in a parking lot. Let me show you the secret glove box, by the way. You have a top one. Woo, that comes down, and then of course you have your normal bottom one there. This is the price for the car. I don't think I've mentioned it yet, probably should have. It's $73,255 as tested, 61.9 base. That's for the R Dynamic. This one's an S, which is like the base of the R Dynamic, but it has the cold climate pack 21s, which just look amazing. Meridian sound system, 18-way heated seats, not cooled, head-up display, bronze color LED headlights, yeah, dark headliner. Basically not that many options, but over $10,000 worth. Let's get out of here. Let's hit the road. All right, guys, we're going to see how the Land Rover handles driving quickly. So we're going to turn engine start stop off. I'm going to put the transmission in its factory S mode, which I'll talk about a little bit more about its calibration because it's pretty good. We have auto hold on right now. You cannot turn traction control off unless you're in a terrain response mode, which is weird, but there's no terrain response modes for performance stuff, even though this is the R Dynamic one. Yeah. So we'll start with the launch and we'll see how 355 horsepower, 369 pound-feet of torque.
Nailed it.
Something like that. Left foot hard on the brake, flooring with the right. Wow, 2,500 RPM, off we go. Revs all the way out to like 6,700. There we go, on our way to 60, and boom, with 3 people in the car, she boogies. Why does this not have 400 PS, 390-ish horsepower,
yeah,
like
so
the Defender?
It's just the detuned, same drivetrain, same engine, just detuned, which is strange. So theoretically, you could tune this to match the Defender, but which is what I would do immediately.
Well, actually, I don't know.
I wouldn't buy this Defender.
Right, you'd get a Defender, yeah. Well, we can talk about that, but this is the sportier one, especially in our dynamic trim. So let's see how it handles on our favorite road to do this type of driving. In terms of chassis, identical to Defender, except totally different tuning. First off, so much more compliant on the road, I find. And it has adaptive damper, of course, full air suspension, and you know, I've driven LR3s, LR4s, all of the previous generations, and they sucked when you drove them hard because they were so wobbly. And this thing, yeah, it's definitely soft, but it definitely controls itself well. Now, in terms of the powertrain, listen to this. It sounds amazing.
You get it from behind and in front.
Yeah, you get a lot of air noise out the exhaust. It's the inline 6-cylinder Ingenium engine, which is so smooth. And I have to say, I think they made a smoother inline 6 than even BMW has.
Wow.
It's really good. Now, right now, we're in the standard S profile for the transmission, which is going to drive and pulling back a little bit farther. The thing that I love about the calibration of Land Rover engineers, they do this for all their cars, is when you drive around slowly in S, you're not like bouncing off the rev limiter, it's not hanging revs everywhere, it's like, oh, you're driving normally. But then as soon as you put your foot down or start braking hard even, or going hard into corners, it keeps it on boil. So it's very adaptive to your driving style, not just throttle position.
Which I love, because a lot of sport modes really get on my nerves. They're just holding it out all the time. And this is, like S in this car is how I would like D to be in all cars.
Yeah, look, it's downshifting on corner entry. I mean, like, I would love to have this car in manual mode, which I can, and I will. But overall, it's doing kind of exactly what I would do myself, although that was an odd downshift mid-corner loaded up, and then it's foot down on the way up, riding this great torque curve. So in the mid-range is really where I think this car could benefit from the Defender tune, if you will. Just give it a little bit more. I'm putting it in manual mode with the paddles. It has these wonderful metal paddles on the steering wheel, and we're hard power out. Does it hold at the rev limiter? No. So if your foot is past the kickdown switch coming out of a corner, it will not hold at the rev limiter. If I'm not past the kickdown switch, perhaps, let's see, still upshifts. So, what did you think? Do you think it did that for you yesterday? Because you mentioned it held at the limiter?
It didn't, no, it didn't hold very long, but it held if I didn't push it too hard. But it's just really not it's not a true enthusiast driving machine, which it wasn't made to be, but it's funny that they give the sporty names to these things.
Well, our dynamic, I have to say, like, overall, look, we are in a 7-passenger SUV that does not care about being hustled up this road. The engine, drivetrain-wise, stellar at this type of thing. Look, we're in 3rd gear. We could be in 2nd, but we're just taking this mid-range torque out of here, staying in it. It's competent. It's holding itself really well. Boogies. Really does boogie when you stay in it.
Most people would not complain about this at all. They don't care what gear it's in. They just want to have fun in the mountains, and this does let you do it.
Absolutely. You can definitely get up a road quickly, which you couldn't do in the LR4. The LR4 was fine, and it had the supercharged V6, the later ones, or the V8, which is the one I would get earlier on. The non-supercharged 5-liter, I think, is the peak of the Discovery lineup, and they're pretty cheap now if you don't get the V6 ones.
Yeah.
The supercharged ones. But I think this thing, for sure, on a back road is definitely the best handling Discovery. And it's very competent. Like, when you start really getting the weight around, paddles respond quickly, wonderful metal paddles. Overall, it's not meant to be a performance car. We don't need to harp on it too much. You can get to the ski mountain pretty quickly.
It's so comfortable and quiet.
You do have to use a lot of throttle, though.
Yeah.
Like, look, that's like, the throttle's really long, so it's kind of awkward to keep your foot so far down all the time. Let's see how nimble it is in the tight stuff. Keep the revs up in 2nd. So coming in, big power on exit. That was even a little bit of power on rear assistance, I would say. It's starting to get a little laggy. It could just be getting hot or altitude that's freaking it out. So that's full throttle. Now boost. But I really like it. You can get off throttle when it's loaded up and kind of get the weight on the front, and it holds itself really well. Steering ratio, not quick enough in my opinion for performance driving. It's really slow. It's the Defender steering rack basically. But you know, fine, no feel, wheels too big. But for everyday driving, I think you know, that's probably a fine compromise, considering most people aren't gonna drive it like this.
Yeah.
And your impression from the passenger seat of driving it quickly?
It's just a great everyday driver, like you said. It's not a track monster, but for a fun spirited driving the canyons, you're gonna enjoy it. The
What
kids
do you
will
think of
enjoy
the
it.
noise?
The noise is fine. It's quiet when you want it to be, and then there's that loud noise, and it's actually like really loud on the back. I wonder how the 3rd row being up would change that, but that would
Moving
actually,
a lot of air out the back,
that would
isn't
kind of
it?
annoy me, I think, after a lot of driving.
Do you guys hear any engine noise from up there? It's all exhaust back here for me.
Yeah, we hear all the engine up
Yeah,
here.
it's only exhaust back here.
Yeah, that's for here. I think we get a nice blend.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it. You can at least get places quickly. on to the next thing. Hello, you join me in a POV format now because we actually accidentally erased some of our review footage that was supposed to be going right here in this video, and we only just realized, and the car's about to go back. So what I'll do is I'll summarize in this not so traditional way how the vehicle drives in the city and how the vehicle drives on the highway, and we'll make it pretty quick because there's a lot to cover. But really, at the end of the day, what you need to know are the positives and the negatives. So here are the positives in the city. The throttle pedal is a little bit lazy, but it's predictable, so you just need to use a little bit more than you're expecting, but you can put your foot down, and it certainly has a ton of low-end grunt. It doesn't need to rev out. It doesn't make a fuss every time it accelerates. So that is a really good engine low down. Let's try not to get crashed into by that guy. So very pleased with the engine around town. Not only is the engine good, the start-stop system is amazing. Because this is a 48-volt mild hybrid unit, it doesn't use a traditional starter motor in start-stop. So for example, I'll come to a stop here. You'll see the engine will turn off, boom, and then the engine will turn back on, and it's super smooth, really comfortable, and just goes very nicely. So very pleased with that for sure. Some other things that are really good with this car, I would say, are the overall steering is nice and light. It is a little bit of a long steering rack, but it works well. And the steering wheel, once you get over the fact that maybe it's not so fit for purpose in this car, this is a Defender wheel, it's a little bit utilitarian for a Discovery, it's really nice to use and hold, and the heated bit works. So I'm really pleased with driving this car around town. Maneuverability is fantastic. I do think it could benefit from rear axle steering, which would be kind of a nice thing to add. And overall, yeah, really enjoying just cruising around, doing the commuting, running to the grocery store, doing all the stuff Discoveries are meant to do, you know, sort of discovering every road in your town. It's really, really quite good at this stuff. And now let's talk about some of the negatives, because there are just a handful and not many of them. I think the first is really going to be the cargo room behind the third row seat. 9 cubic feet is just not that much. So I'm pretty displeased with the overall room behind the third row. And then I would say, yeah, that throttle pedal, while the engine is very competent and doesn't need to rev out much, you do have to wait for it a little bit. You put your foot down and you have to wait for it to build boost and wait for it to register. That's what you want. I think I would prefer a little bit of a snappier throttle. But other than that, the brake pedal is a brake-by-wire system. It's really good. And yeah, very positive impression driving this car around town without question. And then on the highway, I actually, if you watch our MPG loop, which will be a separate video than this, we talk a lot about the highway characteristics of this car, but it's extremely quiet, way quieter than Defender that we tested. And yeah, it sits at 1800 RPMs at 70 miles an hour. It's just amazingly tall 8th gear here, great drivetrain tuning. The big issue for me on the highway, and it's fairly efficient, did 19.7 miles to the gallon in our highway loop. The big issue for me is really just the lack of driver assistance. This particular one's not spec'd with adaptive cruise control on a $72,000 car. That's sort of inexcusable in my opinion. So you got to spec adaptive cruise control, and then there's no lane centering. So you hit this little button here and it will push you in and out of the lane. So if you're drifting out, it'll push you back in. Well, just stay in the middle of the lane. It's not hard. Every car has this these days, but not the Land Rover Discovery. So that is a big issue, I would say, for me. Anyway, at the end of the day, this is a car that many people overlook and really shouldn't. It's an incredible sort of SUV for families, small families. It gives you the right image. It gives you this ability to have, you know, great off-roading or overlanding technology. It gives you a great everyday driving experience, and it is truly I think one of the best 7-passenger non-full-size SUVs on the market. And I just love that you roll into it and you get this nice mid-range acceleration. And it just sounds so good and feels so awesome. This engine is stellar. Anyway, thanks so much for watching another Out of Spec Reviews video. Can't give this thing enough high praises. I know everyone will comment about reliability. My impression is that this thing feels solid, feels well built, feels well engineered, and from a many Land Rover owner around my lifetime, they're actually not as bad as people want you to believe. Hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.